Hello, everyone. This is Kirsten Farney speaking. I want to welcome you to the Mindfulness for Mamas community conversation that we're holding on Thursday. Our Zoom call today is going to be with Poa. And do you go by Poa Van Sickle? Or I know I've seen your full name
Yeah,
there. Okay.
yeah,
Um,
either is fine.
yeah, who
Poa,
runs?
Poa Van Sickle is great.
Yeah, her focus is on wellness. She's a registered dietitian, and she runs a company called Daily Roots and works with people individually on creating wellness in their lives. And so I'm going to hand it over to Poa so that we can get as much wisdom from her as possible during this hour. Go ahead.
Great. Thanks, Kirsten. Well, I'm excited to be here, and in keeping with the Mindfulness for Mamas, just kind of taking a moment and pausing and grounding and tuning in. I wanted to offer this short meditation or release, you might want to call it, as just a way to start and a way to, take a moment if it resonates with you in any part of your day, to do this practice. So if you want to close your eyes, if you're comfortable with that, or if you're in a space to do that, and tune into your body, any place that could feel maybe tight or maybe dark or stressed, a stressful place, and register kind of where in your body is that darkness or tightness or stress holding. And as you take your next, we'll stay in this breath for a few breaths and imagine this great glowing white ball of light, and breathe that in, and breathe it into your whole body, and specifically taking some time to breathe it into that tight spot or that stressed spot or that dark spot that's in you, and swirl that bright white light into that spot, or maybe it's many spaces, and mix it around and swirl it and transform it into even a brighter, stronger, whiter light. And as you are generating that brighter, whiter, stronger light, breathe it out into the world and send it somewhere if you want to. Send it somewhere general, send it somewhere specific, send it to someone specific, send it to a group of people. Maybe send it just back into your life, your house, your family. And as you take maybe 2 or 3 more deep breaths, transforming any stress or darkness inside of you into brighter, whiter light, and sharing that transformation outward. And take a couple more breaths and come back when you're ready. Okay. That's a good one just to have in the back pocket if you are feeling stressed or overwhelmed or tight. When it can be any, quote, small moment, or it could be kind of a big overarching thing going on with you, but it takes as long as you want. So you could sit with that for quite a while, or you could do 3 to 5 breaths and transform just a little of that stress into brightness and send it out. So today, I am going to be talking about managing wellness during this time period of quarantine. And at this time, we're also on the ending of it, right? So there'll be a lot to talk about, but I think a lot will pertain to, no matter when you're listening to this, what's going on, if we're still on lockdown, or if things have continued on and the opening continues to open. So I know just there's a couple of you present today, but I wanted to check in and see if there's any specifics if you're thinking about how your life has been in the last few months with, say, meal prep or taking care of yourself, taking care of your family, feeding, getting snacks on the table, dinner on the table, that kind of thing. If there's any overarching maybe challenge or success or transformation or whatever that you've been going through these last few months, if either of you have any thoughts, and that's fine if you do or don't.
Thanks, Poa, for opening it up. We also have Dana Cole on the call, and so if you hear a third voice, that's who it is. And thank you, Dana, for being here as well. I invite you to, unmute and contribute whenever you feel comfortable. And just, I forgot to mention this at the beginning. Some of us have kids like sitting right next to us or listening outside the door. So if they come in, that's all part of this. I think everybody who's listening probably understands the situation that we're all in right now. But I will say for me, especially in the beginning, my son, I have a 6-year-old who's in kindergarten and a almost 4-year-old who was in preschool before we had the shelter in place. And I forgot how much time the meal prep and just like, I feel like we're in the kitchen all day long. And I sometimes get this, like, can I just be in another room of this house for more than 5 minutes a day? So I think like for me, I'm like trying to find ways that maybe simplify or expedite the process of getting meals on the table and still being healthy, and also allowing, like, my kids are at an age where they're very opinionated, like allowing them to have some choices. Yeah.
Thank you. Anyone else? Someone else joined us, so you're welcome to
I'll
pitch in.
No, go ahead. For my wellness, for myself personally, I was working out a lot of group classes. So obviously those have stopped, and I have not been able to motivate myself to do anything at home exercise wise. So that's kind of been a disappointment for myself that I couldn't get myself like doing it at home. I have a 1 and 4-year-old, and I kind of use that as an excuse, but I've been walking, that's about it. So I hope to get back in some sort of program or, routine with my exercise. But then with meals and eating, I also, like Kristen, feel like all I do is make meals for the kids and clean them up all day long. Totally. It's really hard sometimes. I just don't want to do it anymore. But and my husband's still working out of the home, so that's been tough. Luckily, he comes home usually in time to help with dinner. So yeah, it's been a struggle, but yeah, I'm just excited to hear more about wellness and treating myself kindly. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. So someone else joined us, and you're welcome to unmute yourself and share any challenges or newness or successes that have come in the last few months, if you want to.
Hi, sorry, I'm gonna have video off. I have a newborn at home, and she's just a little loud nursing and all of that.
Aww. Congratulations, then. No problem. Yeah, whatever you feel comfortable with. Yeah.
Last time we saw Mara, she was still pregnant. That's amazing. Yeah. Congratulations.
Yep. She's 5 weeks, almost 6 weeks now. So.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
So sorry, I missed what the intro question was, or.
Yeah, I'm gonna be talking about overarching wellness, but kind of more specific on meal prep and snacking and food, and any challenges that you've had in the last few months specifically regarding that, or maybe new successes or new patterns that have come in. Obviously, with a newborn, your whole world is new, and changed. But if there's anything specific regarding how to make it all come together.
I mean, I don't know. I'm just curious what you have to say. I mean, I think there's definitely been a lot of extra snacking and that sort of thing. I have a toddler at home as well, and my husband's been home, which has been great and helpful. But I also find that like we're just like purging through like, just I don't know if it's necessarily the healthiest snack habits. We try and go back and forth, but it kind of depends how often we can make it to the store and all of that. So
Exactly.
yeah.
Okay.
So yeah.
Cool. Kind of feels like, we're all on the same page. We are trying to do our best with as healthy as we can. We've got little ones at home, maybe partners, maybe not. We're doing it by ourselves. And, I think with or without this lockdown situation comes with its own challenges, right? And so whether we're kind of moving, into a more opening of everything from this quarantine or not, I think these will all still pertain, the things we're going to talk about. And I think leading into this, it's really important just to be gentle with ourselves, because truly, no matter if we're feeding our kids or our families what we consider junk food, we're doing the best we can in that moment. Maybe that's what we have at that time. We've run out of stuff before we've gotten back to the store, or we're kind of overwhelmed and stressed. We're doing the best we can. So I think that's like the important launching off piece into thinking about getting healthy meals on the table, because no matter where you're at, of course, you can maybe get a little healthier, make it a little more efficient. And at that same time, we're not all at the same place. So if one person's getting a little healthier looks extremely different than someone else's, that's just where we're at and those steps that we need to take to get there. So I think probably, it'd be self-sabotage to just be like, okay, now I've got to have all these perfect meals and snacks prepared for my family. So take everything I say with where you're at. Maybe there's one thing, three things, all the things that feel like, oh, I really want to try that. But if it's one, it's one, And so I don't want you to leave this call with more overwhelm about food and snacking. So just kind of throwing out some tips and tips to just start where you're at with one step at a time. So when I think about this question to me, like, how do I make this happen? Or maybe some people are at this place in these last few months where they had all these amazing intentions and, oh, great, we're all going to be home. So now we can all eat healthy and I can exercise as much as I want because I'm, have all this time, and that reality didn't quite happen. And so I call it kind of nudging back to health. And how can that look, especially when we're thinking about food and food choices? And I think it really starts with, well, I guess making a decision, first of all, but then making a plan. So whatever that looks like to you, and I'll run through some stuff, make this very doable for you, right? So whether it's meals or snacks that you're thinking of, a plan is kind of a place to start. And so I think some people, when they think, oh my God, she's not going to talk about meal planning, is she? That feels really stressful and overwhelming and huge. The reality is most families have probably 3 or 4 or more kind of go-to meals that they're good at, they know the family likes, it's kind of just in their repertoire, right? And so start there. And my cat is deciding to join me right now. Apologies, cats or kids. Oh my gosh, sorry about that. So start with these 3 or 4 meals that are your go-tos. You feel like they're good, they're healthy. Your kids are going to eat them, your spouse or whatever is going to eat that. Maybe they make great leftovers, that kind of thing. And start there. And you can even, write them down, put them in a document on your computer if that works. And so you're starting somewhere. And then if you're really wanting your kids involved, you're like, I want the kids to eat it. I want them to be involved. That's the best way, is to get them excited about doing something like this. So you can have, if your kids are old enough, them each pick a meal, and then kind of on some level throw out the expectation of it being the healthiest if they choose something that you don't feel like is that awesomely healthy. But then you can also add extra things to that. And then they're more excited about that. And if you have a partner, ask your partner to pick something. And then before you know it, you might have 6 or 7 ideas, and that's a week, right? And it's not to say you have to make something new every day, because I'm all about leftovers, or, changing something up to make it, if you have chicken and then making it into chicken tacos or something like that. But you're starting somewhere with this plan. And then usually, depending if your biggest meal is lunch or dinner, you fill in. Breakfasts are kind of really similar, lunches and snacks, you could just kind of add that in. And so when you're starting with a plan, then you have that container, and whether you did that for 1 week or 2 weeks, then you just recycle those and you can tweak them. You're not like making a plan for the rest of your life. Because in general, like I said, most of us eat the same cycle of meals anyway. And sometimes that changes throughout the seasons. We're going into the summer, and that might look like more fresh greens or something like that, more berries, but in general, that doesn't totally matter. Then the next step of this is having that on hand. So the challenge right now is getting to the store as much as we'd like and as much as we're used to. So when we have that plan, it's almost easier to shop less frequently. So if you're really kind of going to try to stick to less frequent trips to the store, you could bump that plan up to 2 weeks or something. And then, kind of reorganize it to use your freshest stuff sooner, or that kind of a thing. But when you have a plan and you include your snacks on that plan, you buy according to your plan. And you really set yourself up for success. So if there's things that you don't want to be snacking on, or you don't want your kids to be snacking on, like, don't buy those things. And that sounds really simple. But it's kind of like the easiest way to do it, And then if you have some, quote, less healthy options, but you're still okay with that, that's fine. Have those things on hand for when, the fresh produce runs out or whatever. And I also think there's been this like end of the world syndrome going on, where people do go to the grocery store and they buy all the things that they think they're going to need. I mean, the toilet paper was the beginning, but I feel like dry beans have turned into that. I keep hearing like there's no dry beans on the shelf. So if you have something like that at home, that I just have this feeling, I could be very wrong, that some of the people are using their dry beans and most of the people are just keeping them in their pantry for that someday. But maybe look at what you do have in your pantry and just start to get creative with that. Like, dry beans are something that takes a little bit of effort, but is amazing. You can make a lot. You can freeze them. You can transform them into multiple meals, so you don't get sick of the one thing, So, it's kind of get creative a little bit with the back part of your pantry if you haven't already. I think some people have been using this opportunity to do that. And then as far as like the third thing, so nudging back to health is kind of this container, making a plan, buying what you want to have on hand and need according to your plan. And then the third little piece would be being intentional and kind of tuning into your body. So again, once is better, once in a while is better than perfection. I'm not saying you have to just constantly be in this zenned out place when you've got homeschool and kids whirling around and whatever, but tuning in and really kind of checking in on what we want. Because I think the other thing that I've heard has been happening with this time is people just kind of snacking a lot because they're home and they're bored or they're stressed or whatever's going on. And so when we tune in and we just really check in and saying, what do I need right now? And it's not a moment to judge yourself, because maybe you do need that third cup of coffee or that sugary treat or whatever. And sometimes you don't. And if you do have it anyway, don't judge yourself for that. I say, just notice how that made you feel, because once we're doing those noticing things instead of judging things, our mind kind of patterns start to sink in. We just realize like, oh, that doesn't make me feel good. So maybe next time I'm not going to do that. Or maybe I will anyway, and I'll notice again, and I have to have it reinforced like 7 times or something like that. But, so that tuning in and then responding to that, sometimes the thing we're tuning into isn't food. And after all, it's like, I just need to get outside and get some fresh air. And whether that's stepping outside my patio for 3 breaths, or it's like, okay, kids, we're all going outside, you just have to make that decision, obviously, with the chaos that's swirling around you potentially. but yeah, and then don't feel guilty about whatever choice you make. I think it's just practice, and it's learning, and it's committing that to like making that a body memory, that those things might not be serving you in the best way at that moment. So I want to kind of dive in to, talking a little bit more about good fruits and vegetables to have on hand, that if we're not making multiple trips to the store, and also different snack ideas. But just as far as what I've been through so far, I'm going to open it up if there's any comments or questions that you have, or clarifications from what I've talked about.
I was hoping that you might talk a little bit more about that. You use the term tuning into your body, and I think I've heard other people call it maybe intuitive eating or an intuitive diet. Before all of this happened, I felt like, I was like really good at listening to my body. And now the things that I think my body is telling me are like not good for me at all. And so it's harder for me, I think, because it almost feels like some days like it's survival mode. That process of tuning in just feels really off. Like I'm not able to do it the way that I was before. And I'm not necessarily, like sometimes I'll beat myself up. There was a week where I had like 4 packages of Oreos in our pantry. And my husband's like, what's going on? Are you okay? But to, I guess maybe some of those fine-tuning questions for ourselves of like what we actually should be paying attention to when our body is maybe, or like our mind even is saying, that sounds really good to me right now. To get to the serving as part.
A thought, but I have another question for you, because as you said, and then I do all these things that aren't good for my body. Is that your mind telling you that? Or how do you know that those things aren't good for that? Like, did you feel crappy or yucky when you, or is it just your mind being like, I shouldn't have done that?
It probably, if I'm being honest, it was probably just my mind saying like, wow, that was a lot of Oreos, Kirsten. Which I guess in a sense is true. Like that is guilting myself about the choices. I don't necessarily, I think like Dana said, I in general feel like I haven't been as active as I would like. So in general, if I'm eating those things that kind of make me feel I don't want to think like image weight, but just heavier, like not like I'm not active and feeling like really on the move and healthy.
Totally.
That, there isn't a balance there.
Yeah, totally. I think this is something that most people right now can relate to. And one thing, there's a few things that I have ideas about. And one thing is, and I think this really pertains to moms specifically, and not just moms, but I think it really hits home with moms, is this, because it does anyway, but we're really like everything's being magnified right now because we're at home with our families all the time. And those moments when you're reaching for those Oreos is this moment, like you've been giving, doing, you're nourishing outward. And so we need to nourish inward. And that quick hit, that quick fix is an Oreo. And it doesn't mean it's wrong. It doesn't mean it's bad, which is why like tuning in and paying attention, maybe that paying attention doesn't happen until after the Oreo is consumed, you know, but I think really what's happening is mom or whoever, but really I think moms are like heightened right now as really caretakers, you know, there's a lot going on when we are always managing everything, but specifically now a lot hyper focus, and we really need some sort of nourishment. And so nourishment isn't always food or water, but it often is the quickest way to feel that, you know. So thinking about, like you're saying, you haven't been exercising as much, that's another form of nourishment. And so your body, you know, another thing that I think is it happens with is when we're sleep deprived, you know, and especially as like a new mom, we all remember that if we're not there, like you're so strung out, you're so sleep deprived that you eat because you just need something to feel like this balance of nourishment and rejuvenation or whatever. So I think that's kind of a why it happens and is heightened right now. And we have more access to the stuff just at our home to reach for. So when I say tuning in, it doesn't always mean that that's like going to be like, oh, perfect, I just switched and I grabbed a carrot or I just took a walk. But it's just acknowledging that, you know, like it's like, yeah, I'm exhausted and I just need something. And yeah, right now it is an Oreo. And sometimes it's not though, because sometimes that just moment allows you to pivot and be like, oh my gosh, I just need to get outside, or I am really thirsty and I haven't been taking the time to drink a lot of water today, or I really need a bath. That's not going to happen now, but when my husband comes home, I'm taking some space, you know. So like it can look a little bigger like that, but it can be something quicker too. But I think really the more you quote tune in, and it doesn't have to be a specific question, it just has to be this pause and acknowledging what's going on versus just grabbing the Oreo and not thinking about it. And then the noticing of how you feel, I think a really important follow-up, because maybe that was exactly what you needed and maybe it wasn't, you know. And so if you did pivot and chose something else, notice how that made you feel. And so it's really a practice. And so these small steps of practice are really like, you know, it's not it's not like a boom, this is going to reset, but like it's this practice that sets us up for life. Because even when we go out of quarantine, life happens, stress happens, hard times happen, you know. So we're setting ourselves up for this way to, you know, take back and tune in and tools, kind of a toolkit to realign. I don't know, did that resonate, or do you feel like you need more clarification?
No, I really appreciate and how you talked about that, because as I was saying it, I was like, oh gosh, it's just this like, I have a need, I need to like give myself a little something back.
Yeah.
And then you were saying that, I was like, yes, that's it. And also tied to the other options in our life of how we can, like, I would love to sit and meditate for 20 minutes, but the reality of life right now, because my husband's also working out of the home most of the week, is that that's just not an option to feed myself, to nourish myself. And so I think I am choosing these other things that feel like maybe more accessible with the eating. It's like, it's just a little treat for me. And realizing, you know, that there's nothing wrong with that. That's actually really great that I am, there's a part of that that's really great that I'm looking to nourish myself, that I acknowledge that I have a need to replenish, you know, my empty jar, whatever, you know, it looks like, and give myself a little credit. And it, you know, when Dana said like how to treat myself kindly, I'm like, yeah, I need to maybe treat myself a little more kindly around some of these decisions. So thank you for that.
Totally. And even I completely resonate with that sensation of like, I don't even have 20 minutes to meditate. And if I am completely honest, if I had a conversation with my partner, or if I got up 10 or 15 minutes earlier, or, you know, or if I prioritize that before bedtime, I could find that time, you know? So, getting creative with that as well. Like, and I'm not trying to load more on anyone's plate because I get that. Like, I actually feel that it's exact sentiment. Like, I don't have any more time to squeeze in these things. And I also recognize when I prioritize even a 10-minute meditation over a to-do that I have to get done, ultimately I'm better equipped to serve my family and my business and, you know, my whatever's going on. So that's just something to check in with as well regarding the time. So, did you have something, Dana?
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say I like what you're saying there with prioritizing, you know, what you need to do. But I feel like I put food last a lot of times. Like it's changing the laundry or doing whatever I got to do. So then it's just like whatever's quick and easy to shove in my mouth, get me fed, as opposed to the kids, which I'll make them a little better of a meal. So, yeah, it's hard to like make the time for my own meal I'm struggling with right now. And like, instead of just kind of eating the leftovers or whatever, even off like the kids' plates, really bad. Yeah. So.
Yeah, that's great, because I think there's some people that do really prioritize food and are constantly in the kitchen doing that. And there's other people that are like, I don't want anything to do with food. Like, this isn't my jam. I'd rather do everything else besides that. And and so some of the things I kind of want to talk about, maybe I'll just jump to that, is making things, I don't know if this would resonate with you specifically, but like bulking up on, like, when you're doing it, just doing a lot of it. So that stuff is quick and easy. And I'm a big fan of, when I cook meals, making way too much and freezing part of it, or having leftovers and freezing part of it. So I have just like all this backup. When I, and things that, if that doesn't entice, as far as like, I don't want to eat that same meal, you know, 5 days in a row. Some people are okay with that, and some people aren't. Making things, like I was saying, like bean kind of things, or, you know, generic things that you could plug into many different types of meals, and having that stuff on hand so you can just it's easier to like, oh, that's what we've got, let's throw this together. Or with snacks, you can do the same thing with snacks. I know, like, things like hummus, or, you know, you can buy those frozen guacamoles, or different things like that really freeze well. So if you are into making something like hummus, or even if you buy it, you know, you can have a lot and freeze some of it. Hummus is a little bit different in the texture when you thought, but not that much. Or having fruits and vegetables that last, harder things like carrots and apples and oranges, and, you know, even bananas, and buying some of the bananas green ahead of time, but having those things out and available, or pre-chopped, so it's not an overwhelming, like, I don't want to deal with that bag of carrots. It's like, okay, all at once, I'm dealing with this. This is like this grab and go thing that's ready to go. You know, so some of those things may or may not resonate with everyone, but I think planning and setting yourself up for success includes pre-prepping things, or just having the things sitting out and about that you want to eat. And maybe nuts and kind of trail mix kind of thing isn't appropriate for all kids, but like if it is in your family, you know, having a little dish of that setting out, having a fruit bowl setting out, so you're like, okay, grab that, cut it up, it's out, kids get it whenever you want it. Or, oh, I have that container in the fridge of all those veggies cut up, get it whenever, you know, that's what we're grabbing for. So it is easy, you know, so it doesn't mean something that's easy doesn't have to be something that's not as healthy for you. And some people, I think, have been, you know, baking a lot, or, you know, wanting to include their kids in the kitchen and that kind of thing. And there's a lot of recipes out there for homemade bars, or maybe kind of a no-bake cookie kind of a thing, or cookies or muffins that you can add zucchini or carrots or apples or bananas, or, you know, something a little bit more healthy. If you do something like that and you're into that, making a lot again. So you have those snacks, so you're like, oh, sweet, just take those out of the freezer. So we've got these set up for us. And with all of this, again, like I said at the beginning, I don't know if that's going to resonate with everyone, and I don't want to overwhelm anyone with the fact like, oh my gosh, now I've got to meal plan and make all these healthy snacks and freeze all this stuff. It's just taking bits that resonate and feel like a doable shift. Because I think the reality is, if we're where we're at, we've created these habits of this is how I'm doing it. And if we want to shift out of those habits, it takes just a little shift. Well, I'm into the little shifts. I don't think the overwhelm, switch everything all at once really works, you know, like the 20 or 30 day power cleanse or something. Like, it's a good jump start, but it doesn't really stick. And so if there's something in here that you really want to have stick in your life and make these shifts, then just start small. Start with one thing that feels doable. You know, maybe it's, I'm just going to have a fruit bowl and I'm going to keep it stocked. Or maybe it's, I'm going to freeze my meals. So I have, you know, it's just one little thing versus I've got to now shift my entire life during all the chaos that's going on too. So I don't know if there's any more thoughts on that, Dana, or anyone that resonated or didn't resonate or sounds way too overwhelming, but feel free to let me know.
No, that definitely resonates. And it totally is easier to have lots of leftovers, just for the kids, but for myself as well. So I think reminding myself to make even more than I normally would, to have it on hand or freeze it, is a good idea. And then what you said earlier about not even buying stuff. I mean, we just had Girl Scout cookies be delivered yesterday, so that always happens. But there's certain things that like I will eat that I know I don't want to eat, but I tend to buy them sometimes and not all the time. And so just remembering, maybe I just don't need that, and then I won't eat them. My kids won't eat them. That's important. Yeah.
Okay. That last part kind of cut out, but I think I got the gist of what you were saying.
Oh yeah, sorry.
That's okay. Just as long as I'm not leaving something unanswered. I just want to make sure.
I also liked, I think you had talked about incorporating the kids into meal prep, or, you know, kind of getting them engaged with that process helps them to like feel ownership and excitement over the food that they're eating, even though, you know, we all have kids that are, you know, quote unquote picky eaters, whatever that means. And that I've noticed, like, we cut up a big cantaloupe yesterday, and we were talking about like how much we love cantaloupe. Hey, okay, Colton. And and that's been like their go-to snack every time lately, because we had there was like story and togetherness kind of around the food, that I'm not having to fight them to choose something healthier. So that's one thing that will say has worked for us.
Okay, so there was a little bit of choppy, at least on my end. I don't know if it's my connection right now but so you're talking with your kids about choosing something healthier or just having a conversation. Is that what you're talking about?
Well, I've been involving them more in meal prep, and just one moment.
It's over.
It's not over quite yet. Okay.
And yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just a moment. I'm sorry.
That's fine.
It has made it easier for us, for me and for the kids, to not only have the healthy options, but they think to go for them because they know that they're there. Like, they're involved in the process of like cutting up the cantaloupe. And we were talking, I shared a story about how like the smell of ripe cantaloupe reminds me of my grandmother's. And so just even that process of including them and engaging them allows them to feel ownership.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yes, that's awesome. And that's a brilliant point about just even a story about your memory, even if it's like a cookie or a muffin or whatever, and you can talk about the why behind it. It is often way more powerful for kids, or even intriguing to want to try something that maybe they aren't thinking they're going to like, or something like that. I think I'm going to go into just throwing out some ideas to have on hand. And, even if, like I say, we might be going more into opening things up in our town and in our culture. I don't know if everyone's going to want to still be going to the store as much as we had previously been doing. So, and things will change as we go into summer and seasonality of produce and that kind of thing, for sure. But in general, like if you're wanting fresh fruits and vegetables to have on hand, apples last a really long time. And obviously fridge is best for a lot of these things, but even if you had a garage space that was a little cooler or something like that, some of these things would last a decent amount of time if you bought a lot of them in a space like that. So apples or oranges or any citrus really lasts a decent amount of time. Bananas, like I mentioned, you could, if you're really into those, you can buy those like a yellow batch and a green batch, so you have, they just keep ripening. Harder like root vegetables like carrots and even beets or cabbage or celery, cauliflower, potatoes, sweet potatoes, garlic and onions are things that will last a decent amount of time. Broccoli and heartier greens, kind of more on the medium spectrum, but some of the little lettuces are sold with the roots still attached. That could be something that lasts a little bit longer. You can also revive things like chard or celery by cutting off the stem or a little bit at the base and then putting them in a vase, like a glass of water, kind of like a vase of flowers, and that kind of plumps them up again. And then if you have the space, leaning on frozen, so frozen greens are great. Berries, obviously, some of the stores are selling bigger bags of frozen fruits, like bananas even, all sorts of veggies. And so I think while it might be more palatable and more enticing and feeling more nutritious to have fresh fruits and vegetables as a snack, throwing frozen in meals or smoothies or whatever, you have to just also give yourself some grace with, like, I am getting healthy foods into my kids, even if we're kind of out of a lot of the fresh stuff right now. And then stretching the mind, if you're not open, right now open to something like this, but like a raw fermented vegetable like sauerkraut or even a natural pickle, it's surprising how many kids are into those kind of things. My business previously was making raw fermented sauerkraut. I've been transitioning into doing more wellness consulting and coaching. But it's amazing how many of my clients had little kids, that their minds weren't tainted with the idea that this is kind of a weird food to be eating, and their guts were really just responding that this is really delicious and this is what my body's craving. And I had like a fermented korma, which is like an Indian spice cauliflower that, you know, doesn't seem like maybe a kid snack. All the kids loved that one, you know, so kind of opening like the mind a little bit with like what kids are willing to try, or just even exposing them a couple times if they're a little bit older already, and going for that, because that fermented stuff that lasts for a long time. Which is obviously why people started doing it. And then also thinking more about dried things. Like there's a lot of dried mushrooms out there we can add to foods, or dried vegetables even. There's sea vegetables like seaweeds or nori things that we can include that are really nutritious, and kids often like that kind of stuff. And then obviously dried fruits. If we're making, you know, a variation of ants on a log, you can use carrots or celery or apples, and put a nut butter or a seed butter and some raisins on top, maybe a little cinnamon. Like kids, that's exciting, you know, or even just an apple with cinnamon on top. And then thinking about just kind of adding boosts of things to what you're making. So if I'm making like a bar or a cookie or a muffin or something, I'll just load it with like a green powder and turmeric and cinnamon and maybe chia and flax. So even if it's more of a treat thing, I'm a little bit more confident that I've snuck in a lot of boosts, you know, nutritional, supportive things like that. So, and then thinking along the lines of frozen snacks, you know, the more we go into summer, these might sound more enticing, but, you know, ice cream, there's that banana ice cream, if you haven't tried that you're basically just blending up a frozen banana, maybe with a little bit of frozen blueberries or vanilla or something else, but not really anything else. And it's like a delicious ice cream treat that isn't ice cream, you know, or making fun frozen popsicle kind of treats with your kids that, you know, are loaded with stuff. And so you're pretty confident in just handing them that, or like there's chia pudding recipes out there that are coconut milk, chia, some fruit, maybe a little maple syrup, those kind of things that kids can totally get involved with, and so they're excited about, and they last in the freezer, and you know, you're confident and feel good about just, that's a quick grab, you know, to just pull out something like that to hand to your kid, so, or yourself, of course. So those are just some ideas, you know, to obviously when you have the produce that you've got, use the stuff you think will go quicker first in your plans or in your days, you know, pull out those fresh greens or whatever, but then rely more on the heartier things. And then finally the frozen things, you know, so you just are like, okay, we're getting stuff in. I'm not going to overly stress about it. We're doing the best we can, kind of thing. So those are my thoughts, and hope something in there might have helped spurred you with some sort of idea.
Thank you. Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Poa. I feel like all of those were really helpful. And also, you know, just thinking back to earlier in the conversation where you're talking about the pause, and even if it's after what you've, you know, eaten, of, you know, really thinking about what am I needing right now, and what is, maybe what are some other options that aren't even food. I think that's so, like, it's interesting how, just one moment, please, how so many of our choices with food throughout the day have to do more with maybe other things that we're not conscious of than the actual food itself. I remember I just was thinking about someone who was talking about she has ADD and realized that she craves crunchy food because the sensory activation and engagement with a crunchy food really gives her something that she's like not getting throughout her day. And that just the awareness of that need being met was revelatory for her. So thank you for inviting us to pause around and have some mindfulness around all of this.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all have our thing, you know, like your friend that recognized in herself with the crunchy thing. You know, we all have our reasons that we reach for something else, you know, even if it's like a glass of wine or whatever, or something that's, you know, a cigarette or whatever other unhealthy habit that isn't necessarily food related. And we have that reason. And so when we tune in and start to recognize that reason, it's like, I'm not feeling nourished in some way. And how can I change that? How can I switch and pivot out of that feeling? And it just takes practice, really. It's one day, the next moment, and then not beating yourself up when you don't. You know, just like noticing again, oh, I didn't that time, and now how do I feel? That's almost like a bigger teacher than doing it, doing it quote perfectly. So.
Well, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that I was just going to say that's kind of what I've got. And so if there's any other thoughts or comments, I'm welcome to that as we wrap up.
This is a kind of particular, so I'm struggling with a very picky eater of my 1.5-year-old daughter right now. And I liked your suggestions about the frozen, ice cream, because she seems to go more for frozen foods than anything else, but she has really just like 3 things that I circulate, and then she'll get bored of those, but she won't eat anything else. And I try and introduce new foods, and she just, some weeks it's a color thing, others it's a texture or a temperature, but I don't know. I mean, she's young, and so we're kind of just, resort to whatever she puts in her mouth. Like if we get something in, it's a small success, but it's really hard right now too, when I get so frustrated, because it's like, well, went to the special trip to the store to get the berries because you love the berries, and then now you're going to protest berries all of a sudden. Her go-tos are fruit and cheese, which, I feel like she, can get enough off of that, but I don't know. Any advice for picky eaters of a really young age? She's 20 months. So
yeah, that's hard. And I think like, unless, she's underweight or seemingly undernourished, I wouldn't stress about it all that much. I'd look at a few things of like, how do you guys eat as a family, or do you kind of do her meals and your meals separate? I think the more we're exposed to things, it's not necessarily like forced to eat them, but made to feel like these things are very normal. The more we can grow into accepting that. And it might feel like forever on your end, but it might not be that long. Like even if it's a year, that day by day, that feels like, oh my gosh. But the more, the things that you're hoping she eats are very normalized and offered and not attached to. So you're like, oh, cool. Like we're having these 3 things. At least one of the things she's going to be into. I mean, maybe you don't know, because if she's like into berries and you get the berries and whatever, but on some level that could be, and she seems a little young to be fully like controlling the situation and manipulating it. But I think little kids are tuned in way more to their body than we give them credit. We're in our mind thinking this is healthy, this is not healthy. And they're just kind of in their body being like, this is what I want. And so on some level, I really don't think we need to fully stress about it. But as long as like a wide variety of things are offered and continue to be offered, I think that's the most important thing. Because if we get in these pigeonholes of like, oh, well, she's only going to eat mac and cheese and berries, so that's all we can do, then that's reinforcing that for her. Whatever that is. But I mean, let her eat what she's going to eat. And the other thing is sneaking things in where she doesn't know, so if she'll eat something, that you can sneak in something that's blended, so there's no trace of that she can eat it. A smoothie is a perfect example, but you can even do things in like spaghetti sauce kind of things or whatever, that she'll like, or maybe she starts liking something that you feel like you can sneak a little bit more nutritious things in there, it might give you more confidence and peace of mind. But in general, without really knowing her and like working real closely, like those are the things I would recommend, is really,
Okay.
do you eat like that with like in front of her and offer her the things you're eating or do you
Well,
tend to cook
we
for her?
try at because actually the location of where she eats, we've kind of given in because we found that she will put more in her mouth and eat if she's just on the go doing whatever she wants to do, which I don't love. Like I would love her to sit in her high chair when we eat and we offer her some of the stuff we're eating, but she just doesn't go for it. So we've totally given in. We're like, okay, well, if you want to go eat at your little play table, but then she just like, we'll pick something up and then just be walking around playing it. She kind of snacks, like she's just like a grazer like that. And I've given into it, which I don't know if that's a terrible practice to be going or bad road to be going down, because she just, I don't know. I do feel like she's manipulating us already.
Yeah.
And she's so young.
So,
well,
something along those lines to think about. And I get it where you just like, okay, fine, whatever, just eat. Another thing to think about is she might not really be hungry when you're offering her the new foods. Because if she's kind of grazing and isn't fully like, oh my gosh, I'm super hungry right now.
Yeah.
I've found that, I mean, my kid isn't the same kid you're talking about, but there's sometimes where he's just like, no, I don't want that. But then he'll be ravenous and we've saved it and he just gobbles it up, And so there is something to that, just innately hungry and wanting I'm hungry, I'll eat it,
Yeah.
kind of thing. So I think there has to be a balance with that. And as a mom, I think, or I think are more tuned into the needs of your kid than just some quote expert advice tells me to do this. But I would play with that, if you're like, well, you can snack now, but not a couple of hours before dinner when you're wanting her to eat with you, and then see if that shifts. I mean, she might throw a little fit for a while if she's been used to having her own way, but I'd say that's worth a try too.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Yeah, sure thing. Any other thoughts out there?
Well,
I like
Poa,
seeing all the kiddos.
We've like had the gamut here of small children from newborn all the way up to 6. All the ages. Well, before we leave, because I know we're coming up on an hour here, and I wanted you to have a chance to talk about the program that you are offering, and put the invitation out there if you'd like to.
Yeah, thank you.
People can find you.
Yeah, well, my website is wydailyroots.com, and my email is dailyroots@outlook.com, and I'm on Facebook and Instagram as well. But right now I have a 10-week program or 10-week package called Purposefully You, Realigning to Balance. And, you might kind of feel it by the way I've talked on this. I just really feel like the whole really matters of us. And when things are out of balance, it's not just food, it's not just movement, it's not just stress or whatever thing that can just really realign us into a centered place. It's tweaking all the little aspects of things. And so why I love working with people on a longer term basis is because it gives that space to really make those changes instead of, like, okay, I'm going to dive headfirst, all in and do these changes. I really don't see things usually lasting and sticking. And in doing it this way with these small tweaks, taking people from a more overwhelmed, exhausted area and just opening up space to find more clarity and maybe confidence even in their health journey, and being able to navigate it in the future where things might go off again and you're like, okay, well now I have these tools to get realigned and I know how to do those things. And so I love guiding people through that. So all that stuff, information is on my website. If you would like more information, even a list of things I talked about today, feel free to shoot me an email at dailyroots@outlook.com. And I have a Facebook group, a lot of things going on, but I'm at WY Daily Roots on Facebook, and then my Facebook group is Daily Balanced Wellness, and then on Instagram at Daily Roots. So there's a lot of places you can tune in and find me and some of my tidbits of what's going on. I try to keep most of the stuff a little bit active.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. And
Yeah.
I just want to say thank you to Dana and Mara for joining us today. Again, Mara, thank you for joining when you have a little newborn at home. Good for you.
I know. Jeez. I think I finally got her down.
So sweet. What's her name?
Olivia.
Olivia. Well,
Yeah.
we're so happy for you both, for your whole family. And thank you guys. If we don't have any more questions, then I think we'll just wrap it up there.
Yeah, perfect.
Thanks so much for having me, Kirsten.
Thank you.
Thanks for organizing these, Kirsten.
Well, I really enjoy it. It's a pleasure. All right. We're going to sign off. Thank you guys for being here, and talk to you all soon. Bye.
Yep, have a good day. Bye.